Hey, everybody, and welcome aboard another episode of the MBA podcast. And it's me, James, and I've got Ash placed it in the black corner. I'll call it the black corner today. Ash, how you doing?
Let's go with black. Yes, it's the multicolored corner, but a bit of black dominating the centre. Going well, James. How are you?
Really good, really good. Listeners, hope you're doing well too. It's episode 202, and today we're talking about, well, we've got a title for you. This month actually is all about going hands off, which is one of our 9 core topics that we talk about in building a successful mortgage business. So today's all about, or this week is about why prioritize business building. And we're going to approach this from a slightly different angle. It's not what you're probably used to hearing. Everybody's heard the working on your business versus in your business. But we want to talk today a little bit about the prioritization and mindset between having a job and a business. And a lot of mortgage brokers, well, I mean, Ash, the nature of the mortgage industry is that most mortgage brokers come from an employed background. We've talked about this in past episodes that myself included, before I was a mortgage broker, I worked in a couple of different banks in business banking and lending. So it's kind of a steeped, locked issue that a lot of people are coming from an employed background and then taking that same mindset into business, and it's causing all sorts of problems. So I don't know where you might want to start with this one, but we've definitely got a few things to say.
Yeah, there's a little bit to unpack in this one, I think. It's almost one of the big dark secrets locked away in the vault. And it's the transition from being self-employed or having a job self-employed to running a business. And I think it's a really, really big leap for a lot of people. And I was a little fortunate when I came into the industry that I came from a job, but I had had a few years as a manager of a business. So I guess it had worn me up a little bit to some of the demands and the prioritizations that you need to run a business, which I think you've touched on, which is really separating yourself away from the doing into the managing or working on the business. And as obvious as that sounds, I think so many brokers get into this industry as a career for sales and as a career to be self-employed. Not many get into it day one thinking, I'm going to build a business. So I think at the core of this discussion is a really, really important truth, and that is you need to find a way to adopt that business building mindset early on, unless, of course, you are strictly entering the industry to be a broker and to work for somebody else. But I guess I'm speaking, James, to all the people out there, our listeners and watchers who are in this industry to own a business.
Yeah, which is our core market, of course. We love helping brokers, but it's the broker business builders. I was just thinking one thing, Ash, that would be important for our listeners, and we know this is the biggest issue in that building the business doesn't bring in cash. For example, you're a broker, you're trying to build a business and you're trying to build a team and increase your capacity and scale, settle more loans, right? So it's natural that most brokers that are in charge of their business focused more on the work and the delivery and seeing more clients, like prioritizing seeing clients, speaking to customers, writing loans, looking after my team. That is the delivery team and writing loans team. We prioritize now value, and it's very easy to prioritize now value because it's, well, that's what pays the bills. So maybe we can start a bit of a discussion around the concept of working as a broker and settling loans is now value, but prioritizing business building is that future value. You can't really always see it straight away, and it doesn't put money in the bank straight away, but it's kind of the only thing that's going to put value in the bank, because only focusing on now value is essentially you've got a job, and a job is hard, it's time bound, you have to be there, it's repetitive, and if you stop working, you stop earning. So let's talk about that as a concept.
It's one of those dry topics, isn't it, James, and listeners, viewers? It's sort of one of those dry topics that, this would be the point where I would double down and really listen to this one and not switch off, because I actually think it's one of the most important topics, is getting your thinking right, getting your mindset right about, am I here to build a business? If so, where do I start? What are the steps along that path? And what are we now? It's the start of September 2024. I am seeing some green shoots, if you like, in the industry where there's a bit more education upfront with brokers coming into the industry. And I'm seeing even, aggregators and some of our other, larger mortgage broking businesses providing some guidance around this. But it's still sort of pretty limited about, where you're at that starting point. So if you're already in the industry, which most of our listeners obviously are, how do you separate yourself out from the need to make money, right? Because that's what you're talking about, is that, and I was there for several years. I need to replace the income I've just given up. Took me 2 years, by the way. Anybody wondering where they're at in their journey? The income that I gave up to be a broker took me 2 years to get back there. Plenty of times could have given up during that period. And I would say, whether that's normal or not normal, I'm not sure. But that was my focus, right? I wasn't focused on building a business. I was focused on find customer, see customer, make money, right? Because I had bills to pay. I wanted to make up lost ground on that income. And that was all my focus was. And look, that's okay. But probably what was missing, and I think what's missing for a lot of people is, well, how do you do that? Because obviously money is important. At the same time as starting to put some building blocks in place that will take you down the right path to building a business. Because we know, right, James, there's a lot of pivot points or forks in the road when building a business. What's my model? What's my system? What aggregator? What am I trying to build? Who's my first hire? Etc. 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 So this shift in thinking and mindset from being, I need to find a customer, win the business, get it approved, settle so I can get commission into my bank so I can keep operating. So it's almost it's a cash flow based approach, which is really important, right? You've got to have cash flow, but it's more cash flow, I would say, and reflecting on my own experience, it's more cash flow from the perspective of a personal cash flow, i.e., how much money can I take out of these commissions to call income to pay my mortgage, put my kids through school, whatever it is that I need to do. And that's really, really
Yeah,
valid, right? But that's different to cash flow in a business.
it is, and it's completely fair, I think, to listeners that I mean, you have an opportunity in business and broking to help people and make really good money if you're good at what you do, and it becomes very difficult to turn down business when every person that knocks on the door is worth a certain amount of money. I think the biggest concept, Ash, and listeners, we can reference here is, I think our listeners all do want to run and set up and have a business. Well, most, okay, unless you just want to be a lone writer for another business. But I'd say most of our listeners do want to build a business. And what I said at the start, Ash, around, only prioritizing now value and not future value, I think most of our listeners understand the concept and they do want to put time aside and probably do put time aside to work on the business. The crux of this episode, I think, is what's in the title: why prioritize business building. And as we know exactly what it's like, listeners, to be a broker, when you get busy and you get in demand and someone's knocking at the door saying, can I work with you? I want a loan, I need help. What we end up doing, this is the biggest downfall, this is everything, Ash, I think, is if we've got 100% of the time available, which is, well, we can't expand time. So you've got 100%. And what ends up happening is, let's say we sit down with ourselves and go, let's allocate 80% of our time for working in the business, and we'll keep 20% of our time free to work on the business. Great. Sounds great in theory. We structure our diary that way. We have a meeting with ourselves. We commit to doing things like business building activities, things that we talk about on this podcast. And what do we know happens, Ash, is that broker or business owner starts getting busier and busier and busier, and there's more knocks on the door and more demand for their time. What's the very first thing that gets put to the side? It's that 20% working on the business. And instead of staying hard and fast and prioritizing business building, no matter how busy you get, 99% of brokers will crash through that 80%, go all the way up to 100 and above percent, because they're in demand and they don't know how to say no, they don't know how to keep boundaries, and they don't know how to prioritize, and don't appreciate the long-term value of prioritizing that 20%. I think that's the biggest issue. Just too much chasing the money now and helping the clients now. I don't want to let those clients down. They're knocking on my door. The business building, working on the business can always wait. It always gets shoved to the side when we're busy. And that is the number one reason why we see a lot of brokers running around successful, but they have no life and they don't really have a business. They're writing a lot of loans.
Yeah, and it overruns you, right, James, and I think everybody gets this, right? I hope you do. And that is, yes, conceptually, I need to separate time. But the problem is, if you don't make certain other decisions and choices at that same time, the work from writing loans will overrun you. And you get more and more busy, and that opportunity to separate time out and make it available to work on your business just gets squashed into a corner. Whether it's personal fitness, diet, relationships, and your business, all of these things fit this criteria of, I know I've got to work on it, but I'm so busy doing other stuff, I'll get around to it as soon as I can. So we've got to think to ourselves, well, what do we do about it, right? So it's there's maybe some different choices. Maybe there's some working on mindset. Maybe there's coaching and advice, obviously. But one of the things I noticed, I'm interested in your opinion on this, James, is very, very few brokers do I see that are prepared to invest capital into their business to fund their plans to grow the business. From a business owner's perspective, most brokers only make decisions to spend money on the business when the cash flow allows it. I.e., I'll build my trail up, I'll wait till I've got enough flow, then I can afford to employ someone or hire a coach or do this or do that because I know I've got enough settlements and trail booked in that I can pay for it. So there's some logic to that, but it's actually a trap, because once you've got your strategy worked out and you've got some idea of what it is you're building, and you maybe built out a strategy and a business model and a budget, and then you can forward plan, well, how much money do I need to invest to build that out? Well, so that would be something that I would encourage anybody to think about if you're really going down the business building path, particularly if you're earlier on. Like some of the more mature businesses, you might have been doing this for 20 years and you might have $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month in trail. So you can afford to possibly draw from that to invest. But nonetheless, I think there's very limited people that I've seen who will invest capital, whether it's their own money, borrowings, selling equity in the business, whatever it happens to be, to raise capital to fund a business building strategy. So it's just something to think about. And I think that comes off the back of thinking about, well, what would I want this business to look like in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months? Where am I going? How am I going to get there? Get some advice, build out a strategy, work out the business model that suits you. And then, well, how much is it going to cost versus how much is going to come from cash flow? Because I don't know about you, James. I've lived this, so I guess I bear the scar tissue of doing it the wrong way and perhaps the right way. But you don't want to be funding building your business by the seat of your pants. Like, each day, week, month, you can only continue to invest in your business if you settle enough loans to pay for it. Right? That's a little bit of a tail wagging the dog a little bit there.
It is. It's not the best place to come from. Even the very basic version of what you just said around investing in the business comes from something very simple, like business makes X. Most brokers will be, well, after you pay expenses, I take the rest and I spend it and I buy myself a nicer car because I'm doing really well, as opposed to business makes X. I, as the broker, earn a wage from my own business and I invest the rest. Like, even just that basic concept of, for example, let's say as a broker, let's say you earn 300 grand in a year and maybe you've got $100,000 of expenses. maybe you've got a couple of support staff and tech and all the stuff. And most brokers would take the 200 out. That's how much I earn. Well, why not take 150 out and invest 50 in the future? Because that's going to be a far better investment than a nicer car or a fancy holiday or just spending it, right? So even that basic level, Ash. I wanted to ask you one thing, because we talked about, well, you mentioned something around the mindset, and I asked myself while you were talking the question, well, what decisions do our listeners need to make? Because it was like you were mentioning something around making better decisions. To go from that job to business mindset. And the number one I wrote down, and maybe I'll get your thoughts on this, is that I think the biggest decision our listeners need to make to prioritize business building and transition from job to business. And listeners, even if you are the business owner, it doesn't necessarily mean you have a real business. It could be a job disguised as a business. The biggest decision for me is to make the decision that I'm number one and I'm the most important. Like, which is, I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, Ash, that selfish, what we're mostly not really taught is to ever put yourself first. But I think if you want to build a business, you have to be a little bit selfish and put yourself number one. Because if you don't make that decision, you will always cut yourself and your business short to serve the clients and the partners at the detriment to your business. You know what I mean? I think that's the biggest number. You're putting clients and partners first. So when they knock on the door, all of your future ideas and plans to work on the business literally go out the door because you're prioritizing them. And it's probably too deep a conversation to have for right now in terms of why that's the case, but that's the number one for me. So maybe you've got one.
Yeah, we could run a whole month of episodes on this, I think. Yeah. Okay. So one of the most common blockages is when I see mortgage brokers trying to build a business that doesn't reflect them as a person or their personality or their desires or their goals in life, or they're just building a business that they've seen somebody else build and it looks great and I want something like that, right? And we see this in our industry. There's a lot of advice around, well, just copy what I did, just drop and drag and drop this structure and you've got a business, so to speak. So I would take that back to that thinking process, to what you just said about prioritizing yourself. So there's a lot to that, right? There's obviously getting out of your own way. There's obviously accepting a successful mindset and a winner's mindset. There's all of those things, but there's also the fact that you've got to build the business based on your own desires, personality, and direction. And I know this might fly in the face because people think, oh, a business has got to be successful. It's got to be decentralized. It can't be dependent on the owner, yada, yada, yada. That is all true, folks. That is all true. But it doesn't mean you don't build a business around your nature as a person, what you believe in, what your purpose that you're heading. Because I'm a believer, James, in many ways, that with rare exception, a business is the vehicle for the owner to fulfill their personal financial desires, whatever they happen to be, whatever you want to do in life or however old you are, the business is the vehicle to utilize to achieve those aims. So I would take that away and go, well, what are my aims? What are my goals? How much money do I need to do that? What else would I be doing? And then the business is, well, okay, what does the business need to look like and be worth and generate in order to achieve those outcomes? So then the business starts to take shape based around that. But I think if you don't do that, what happens is the business just takes on the shape of a slightly anxious, slightly stressed out business owner, and you hire people that you think will help you build the business without actually seeing where they fit into that. So the business starts to take on a shape and a personality that's different to you. And I do see that quite a lot. So I would encourage anybody to take that thinking away and go, well, what do you do about this? Right? Well, I think the starting point is to have a think about, What is your purpose with this business? You know, whether you're 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, no matter where you are in the cycle of life and business, have a think about what you'd be doing next, you know, and how much money that would cost. And then how much does the business need to generate? Because that brings you back to straightening out why you're building a business. Right? If you can't answer those questions, I would argue you probably shouldn't be building a business. You probably should be either just stay self-employed or take a job working for somebody else where you can make a good income. Like if it's purely about money, write loans for somebody else and make 250 grand a year if you're really good at it. But if you want to build a business, this is the path you've got to go, and you've got to look at those big picture things. And it's tricky because I ask this question of brokers a lot, James, as you probably know, right? Is what's your big picture? And they'll say, oh, I want the business to be X, Y, Z. And I said, well, that's one of the part of the big picture. What about you as a person? You know, what would you do beyond this business? Oh, I'd do this. I'd do this. I'd travel. I'd invest. I'd have a not-for-profit, whatever it happens to be. Well, then how much money would that take? How much capital and how much money would you need to have invested to generate the income that you need to replace what you would have otherwise taken from the business? So it's this sort of big picture thinking. Now, without getting too far down that rabbit hole, just for listeners to have a think about the starting point to shift your thinking away from being trapped in the business, writing loans, maybe making a good income, to going, well, what is the thinking shift to start thinking like a business owner?
Yeah, I love that, Ash. And I like the fact that you brought up, the topic is why prioritize business building, but what sort of business are you building to, and making sure it's one that works for you and your personality. I'd like to pose a bit of maybe it's a thought exercise or a challenge for our listeners, going back to, as a bit of a summary for me, I guess, thinking again about for every hour that you work, in your business, you can invest that time in creating now value or future value. And so I'd be curious, Ash, to get your quick thoughts and maybe challenge our listeners to think about this some more. For every hour that you invest working, honoring the business, so how much is an hour worth to see clients and write loans? That now value. So and a broker might go, well, every hour is worth, well, it's taking me this many hours to write a loan. I make this much commission. Do the math. Like, how much is an hour worth to work on now value? And then I'd challenge our listeners to think, if I invest an hour to work on future value, okay, nothing that's going to bring in a loan. It's not going to help me make $1, but it's building out a system, frameworks, templates, essentially the foundations of something so that you don't have to work anymore. Listeners, that's the foundation of a business. A business means an entity that runs without you. That's the idea of a business. Now, so you can invest every hour working on direct money producing stuff, or an hour on future value. And you'd probably do the thoughts, Ash, and work out that the hour invested in the future value is far greater. Not to mention, think about it, listeners, like if you were to invest 40 hours a week on your business, exclusively on delivery, writing loans, and now value, and you're pulling in good money, big money, but you've got to work 40 hours a week. If you invest those 40 hours a week or a portion of it on building a business out, in 12 months' time, you don't have to work at all, and you still make a substantial salary. That's the value in my mind, Ash. Do I want to make 300 grand a year working as a mortgage broker, seeing clients, helping clients, got a little support team around me? Or do I want to spend a year or 2 years building out a system so I can make 300 grand a year without even having to show up at all? That is for me the mindset shift, and that's why I prioritize business building. And I don't know if you've got any comments on that or something else to say, but that's kind of my summary and challenge for our listeners to think about that.
I've always got something else to say, James. So thank you for drawing me into that. And I agree with you. Look, it goes back to our fundamental principle that underpins our work, which is helping mortgage brokers build a business that works with or without you. And I think that gets lost a lot. Maybe the message wears thin. So this is not about building a business that you don't work and you retire from unless you want to. And I see this a lot with mortgage brokers is they actually enjoy what they do. They don't want to stop writing loans. They don't want to not be involved in their business. So part of the mindset shift is to acknowledge that you can build a business that doesn't need you, but still be very valuable in the business. Right. So I want everyone to take that away. That's a really important connection. These things are not mutually exclusive. Like just because you build a business that doesn't need you doesn't mean that you don't stay involved in the business writing loans or doing whatever it is that you want to do. And I think a lot of people don't figure that out until they're on the journey. They think because you're stressed out writing loans and doing everything, oh, if only I could stop doing all of that. And then you start building a business that doesn't need you to do that, and you suddenly figure out, oh, I actually enjoy doing that. Right. So that is part of the journey with building a business. So just everyone to remember that. And one of the other things you said, James, I think is really important too. And you talked about creating value in a business. And creating value has no immediate monetary return. You're not generating income. So it's separating generating income versus generating value. So this is another one of the really important thinking shifts for people to make. And I would describe that as shifting your thinking away from creating income to creating value. Because when you focus on creating income, there's no guarantee you'll create value. But when you shift to creating value, income comes along for the ride. Right? So if you shift to creating value, which is that future, doing things, investing, building infrastructure, teams, systems, processes, culture, your income naturally rises as a result. So shifting to focusing on value, and that helps to eliminate short-termism, which I think, this whole episode is really focusing on, which is a lot of people give up on building aspects of the business because they don't see any immediate reward and they go back to generating income. So if you can shift your thinking to understanding creating value is a 2 to 3 year project or more. Whereas generating income, go knock on a door, win a client, win it, settle it, that's money in the bank, right? So very important to understand creating value takes time, but it works. And you can be talking millions of dollars of value, which you can just make a higher income from. But if you focus on income exclusively and leave value behind, the value doesn't come along for the ride with income necessarily. So take that away. That's one of the core tenets. I think that's really my summary on this discussion around prioritizing business building. It's about prioritizing creation of value versus purely creation of income.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great summary from your end, Ash. And as a reminder, I guess, for listeners, it's not all about just business building. It's not all about just now value. It's the balance. It's the priorities. It's knowing what to do and when and how much and in what order. There'll be times where you do need to work or close to 100% on the business, or sorry, in the business. But it's having someone in your corner to constantly balance and prioritize that. It's a constantly moving target, I should say, Ash. So for those that are going, yeah, but how do I balance those things? Well, that's kind of what you need external help and advice from. So give us a call and let's have a chat. Been a good episode, Ash. We love business building. We love doing it with brokers that are going about it the right way and with intention and focus, so that they can not necessarily exit and go be bored on the beach, but do what they love or continue to do what they love and have it nice and easy and have a real asset that they can, sell one day, or if they take a few weeks off, it still works. That's the most important thing. It gives everybody choice. So that's why you should prioritize this. Hopefully this has been valuable for you listeners. I've had fun. I guess we'll be talking about systemizing and going hands off and all sorts of things like that this month. So stay tuned to the coming weeks for a bit of a go hands off month. Ash, been fun.
Yeah, great discussion. The industry is very much trending towards business building versus having a job. That's just the nature of a maturing industry. So definitely adopt the business building mindset and then get some help on how to juggle it. You've still got to make an income, right? But you want to be building a business at the same time.
Definitely. it's a fair juggling act, that's for sure. We all know it. Listeners, have a fantastic week. Looking forward to seeing you again next time on the podcast. So yeah, stay cool. We'll see you next time. Ash, you too.
See you next week, James.